My name is Rob Windsor. I am a lead consultant with Pate Group and the chief Imagineer with XTheCloud, and I've been converting coffee into code since the early 90s. Well, I've been doing .NET development since .NET first came out, and I started doing SharePoint development in about 2006 when SharePoint 2007 was released. I wouldn't say an extensive amount of time, but I've definitely spent, quite a bit of time, since the early betas, going over and of course, keeping up as the new releases come out. I think it's in a good spot, except for the fact that, Modern's been out since what? Early 2006, May 2006? Or sorry, 2016. Not quite that bad. And, right now we have web parts, we have extensions, but I'd like to see, I would have liked to have seen the framework be further along in its evolution at this point in time. So actually, I just took a look at the roadmap in prep for this. And it's kind of thin, I think. There's a lot of things that I would like to see on the roadmap, or at least to see mentioned on the roadmap, maybe, and a little bit more on timeframes about when things potentially could be released. So I'm hoping my favorite part of the SharePoint framework is going to be the new MS Graph and AAD HTTP client APIs. I played around with them a little bit. I don't know if concern's the right word, but the idea of the pop-up for authentication, I think could be a little bit problematic with organizations and having to disable pop-ups for your tenant. But the ability to easily call, the graph or other APIs or your own custom APIs, I think is hugely, hugely valuable. I guess I would say content editor web part and script editor web part. I think I can kind of understand Microsoft's motivation for saying we want all JavaScript put into the site to be administrator approved. I get that, but I think that the cost to be able to implement that right now is a little bit too high. To force every single organization to have developers that can build web parts, can figure out how to package everything up, get it deployed to the app catalog, and if you're choosing not to do the in-package deployment, then also the CDN and so on, for things that could be done, quite easily with, a few minutes and a few lines of JavaScript today with the content editor web part in Classic. I think that cost is just too high to achieve the result that they're looking for. I do want to mention that on the roadmap, which again we just talked about, that there is an entry for citizen developer web parts. I think I can't remember the exact wording of it. So it is possible that while it might not be a script editor or content editor web part, there might be something equivalent to that or relatively equivalent to that is on the roadmap that they'll implement. So I think the biggest challenge is the tool set. Not that the tool set is bad in any way or anything like that. It's the fact that the bulk of the developer audience for SharePoint isn't familiar with those tools, right? And quite honestly, there's a relatively steep learning curve for learning all of them. So if you want to do things, the sort of quote unquote, straight line path and follow on the docs, it works great. But when you want to do things that are outside of that path, unless Webpack and Gulp and these other tools, it's really, really difficult. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge going forward. So in terms of the future and adoption and things like that, I think one is going to be, and it's something I referred to earlier, is the speed at which the SharePoint framework evolves, right? So as they add in new stuff, there's a lot of things that I think that be super important. Single page apps is a huge example, right? Form customization is another example. So there's a lot of things that I think people are looking forward to. And I think that if those things start coming out and start getting added to the evolution of the SharePoint framework, that will help with adoption. And obviously it'll help us as developers build business applications for our clients.